here we go. We're about to play the game where he knocks over the tripod. You gotta move your tail, honey. Hello and welcome to the Spooktober special of Yarn to Table. I'm Celeste and this is a show about my knitting life. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm recording this the weekend before Halloween. It probably will not be up until Monday at the earliest, so I hope you are still in the Halloween spirit as you watch this, whether that means keeping the spirit going into November or watching in the first few days that it's posted. It's been about a month since I've spoken with you guys, and I have so many knitting projects to share and lots of fun knitting plans and all of that. So the Fiber Quest KAL, which is our year-long KAL, it is coming to an end. The wool portion of it is coming to an end at the end of October, Halloween. So make sure you get those FOs in, and then we will enter our final land of fiber for November and December, and that is the land of rare and precious jewels. So essentially this is any kind of uncommon fiber. Examples would be musk ox, yak, Angora rabbit, not to be confused with mohair, which comes from the Angora goat, bison or beaver. Those are some examples. If you have other things that I haven't mentioned that you think might be along those lines, feel free to drop me a line and ask. And it only needs to contain 10% of this in the blend. So Angora and yak are probably the most common ones that you're going to find, but if you want to experiment with some of those other ones, that would be awesome as well. And make sure your FOs are 50 grams at least, and check out all the rest of the rules there in the thread. The thread for that and all the other information, all the yarns that I'm using in my projects, the patterns, everything like that is all going to be linked below in the doobly-doo. And let's see. Yeah, so why don't I move on to what I'm wearing? Right now I'm getting really distracted because I don't have my wedding ring on because I made hamburgers last night and I left it in the ring dish in the kitchen. It's kind of driving me crazy, but it's fine. I will remember to put it on after this. I feel naked and then like I see my hand up there and it's weird. Okay, trying not to get distracted by too many segues too early in the episode. So the first thing that you might notice that I'm wearing is my witch hat. This is one of my favorite things I've ever knit, even though it is so simple and silly. I love to wear this in the month of October. Just around the house a lot, and then I'll usually wear it to give out candy to trick-or-treaters. So this pattern is called Bewitched, and it is by Oates, and I just knit it up in some Knit Picks worsted swish a few years ago, and I love it. The other thing you may notice in the background, I have my little Belfry and Boo keeping me company. Those are some fun little stuffies that I knit a few years ago as well, and I talk about them in more detail in one of my October episodes last year, if you want to look that up. By the way, information for all of my projects is on my project pages on Ravelry, and if you ever want to look up an episode where I talked about something, like if you want to hear me talk more about those stuffies, you can go to the blogs tab on the project page on Ravelry, and that'll take you there. Also, I should have mentioned, in addition to the Yarn to Table group on Ravelry, my project pages on Ravelry, you can also follow me on Instagram, and in both places I am Celeste Full. Okay, so the other FO that you may have noticed is my Tecumseh sweater. I guess I'm going to stand up to kind of give you a bit of a shot of it. It is this big sort of swan show-ish shape. It's something between like a sweater and a swan show. It's got a yoke that comes down basically to your elbow. Really beautiful color work. And I have talked about this when it was a width in the past. If you have been living under some kind of rock, the pattern is by Caitlyn Hunter, who you may also know as Boylan Knitworks. And I'm so happy with it. I love it so much. I will say, I talked last month about how I struggle with color work and with tensioning the yarn, and that's something I really want to work on. And even with blocking, the color work sections are a little bit tighter than the non-color work sections, and that is a bit of a disappointment to me. I don't think it's super noticeable or super bad or anything, and it's still a very beautiful sweater, but that is something that I tried in the blocking as best I could to stretch out and keep this from being lumpy and bumpy, and I succeeded for the most part, but it certainly could be better. And I think that just generally speaking, you don't want blocking to be a substitute for proper shaping when you're knitting things. There's only so much blocking can really do, and blocking is wonderful and it totally transforms objects, and I just think it's an incredible tool. But I think that it can be dangerous to try to rely on it too much and think, you know, oh, it's okay that the color work's really tight or bumpy or something right now, it'll block out. Like, it will, but it'll also ultimately look even more beautiful if you make it as close to the shape and the gauge and the tightness and the evenness and everything in the actual knitting, and then just use blocking as something to make everything really come together at the end. So I do think I'm taking a little break from color work until I feel like I have managed to kind of transition into training myself better to tension the yarn. For anyone who is a relative newcomer, I am a self-taught knitter, and I actually taught myself out of a book, not with videos or anything, and the book itself didn't even have photographs. It just had illustrations, and the illustrations just had needles and yarn. They didn't have hands. So basically the way that I tension yarn is just completely my own invention, and it is not an incredibly practical way to do it. And there's nothing wrong with that. This isn't about the whole sort of like, oh, this is the correct way to knit sort of thing. There are a million different ways to tension yarn. There are different standards all over the world, and lots of individuals do their own combination of things, and that's awesome and beautiful. It is just a thing where, for me, I feel that knitting would be more ergonomic and more efficient if I kind of pushed through the learner's curve of trying to tension it better than I currently am. So I want to take a little bit of a break on the color work until I can do that. That being said, I do of course still have the Sunset Highway going as my project that I knit only during Return to Stars Hollow when I'm recording that, and it still has some color work for the sleeves that needs to be done, so I'm going to do that. But I'm going to try not to start any new color work projects, even though I have been dreaming of the underwing mitts again. I've been wanting some mitts, well, I have a pair of mitts that someone else knit for me, actually, but I've been wanting to knit myself some mitts because I love having them at this time of year when you go out and you get in your car in the morning and the steering wheel is kind of cold. I just think it's really nice to have some mitts between your hands and the steering wheel. And the underwing mitts have been on my to knit list for a while, and I've purchased yarn for them and everything. And I kept seeing them in the Tell Me About Your Rhinebeck sweater video that Christy Glass just put up, and it was reminding me just how much I want them. But like I said, if I tried to knit them, it probably would take so long anyway that we'd be dead in the middle of winter and I'd be wearing real gloves by the time they were finished. So I think I need to just resist the urge and you know, put them aside with my list of colorwork projects that I will get to in the future. So anyway, that's basically my story with the Tecumseh. I really, really love it. The shape is strange, but it's not as difficult to wear as I thought it would be. Actually, because the fabric is relatively thin, I actually knit this in a sport weight. It's designed for DK, but I knit it in a sport weight. Since the fabric is relatively thin and not super, sorry, Augie Wanson, I've shut him out because you've seen before, he gets in here and he tries to knock over the tripod and everything. Okay, but he's begging, so I'm going to go let him in. We'll see how this goes. So what was I talking about? This is my little familiar Augie, if you haven't met him. Gosh, I've completely lost my train of thought. It's talking about color work. Oh, so I was a little worried that this sweater, the Tecumseh, would be difficult to wear underneath a coat because the armpit is so low, you know? And I have another sweater like that. I have the Kodo that is a drop shoulder, but it's a really oversized drop shoulder. And it's knit out of Brooklyn tweed shelter at a fairly tight gauge. So it's a relatively stiff, heavyweight, sort of structured texture with an articulated rib and everything, which makes it sort of even more so. Here we go. We're about to play the game where he knocks over the tripod. You got to move your tail, honey. So anyway, that one I basically can't wear under coats, and it's kind of frustrating because it really limits how much I can wear it, because it's very warm, so I basically can only wear it like instead of a coat, but it's a pullover, not a cardigan. So anyway, I was worried that this was going to be something where there was a very limited number of times that I could wear it because I couldn't properly fit it under a coat. But it's actually been okay. It's not super comfy inside of a coat, and I can't wear it in like a super fitted jacket, but I have a slightly more oversized coat that I can fairly easily put this on underneath, and I think it's because the fabric is not only a bit thinner than the Kodo fabric. He's pressing his face up against it. I have to like hold it still so he doesn't move it. The things we put up with for the little fur babies that we love, right? Oh, he's so soft. So it's a thinner fabric than the Kodo, and it's also a little bit drapier and less stiff. And I think both of those things together are helping it to be easier to wear this under coats. So anyway, all in all, I'm very pleased with it. I fell in love with it back when it was just a yoke on Caitlyn Hunter's Instagram and she hadn't even finished it. I just really, really love, I'm very into the like Swiss cross on anything, and I just thought it was so beautiful. I loved her color story in her original, which I've echoed. I've done something fairly similar with that. There's some more up close looks at the sort of depth and of the colors that I've chosen. They kind of read as gray and black, but they're actually much more colorful up close. So if you want to look at past episodes, you can get a better shot of that. But anyway, I'm very pleased with it. I feel like when there are those sweaters that everyone is knitting, on the one hand, I feel a little bit like I kind of want to be more of a hipster and knit different things than everyone else. But then on the other hand, I just really, really love the way that we can each kind of make it our own, and I love seeing like just different iterations of the same sweater. That was something that was really cool to watch in the Rhinebeck footage, especially Christy Glass's, but other places as well, is just to see like a bunch of different Zweigs or a bunch of different Tecumsehs. Mainly Caitlyn Hunter sweaters, because I think we're all a little obsessed. But you know what I'm saying. Like, it's, even when you just get on Ravelry and look at different things that people have done with the same pattern. I hope that thumping isn't too loud. He is like whacking his tail on the table, but this is what we're working with. I spent the morning away from home, and I just got home and came immediately to record. And that's why this is happening, because I have not spent adequate time giving him attention today, and he is not into that. And I understand. It's a reasonable request. Augie comes first. So we just have to multitask. We just have to do some Augie cuddles while we show off our yarn. And yeah, we'll see how that works. I think it's appropriate to have the kitty cat here since I've got the witch hat on and everything, right? So I feel like I've gotten so distracted, but hopefully that was informative about the current state of affairs with my finished object. I have more finished objects to share. I have a finished pair of socks, and then I have a hoe. I have a half object, one sock. Okay. So the finished socks are what you've seen before. These are the Clark socks by Jaclyn Salem. Okay, that thumping is super loud. There's no way you're not hearing that. Augie, can you please try to stop doing that? No? These are by Jaclyn Salem. I have waxed poetic about how much I love this pattern in the past. And so I think the only thing that I have to add is just to share a little confession about my own stupidity as I was knitting the second sock. So essentially, I kind of made various alterations on the fly as I went with this in order to get the stitch count down lower on the foot. And I've talked about why and gone into the details in that in the past. But that kind of, I also added a fish lips kiss heel, which is not called for, and just various different things, which all of those are detailed on my project page if you're curious as well. Anyway, I was knitting on this just being like, oh, I've knit the first one already, I'm fine. And I was knitting on it at a knit night at a local yarn store. And I was there with my friend Melissa, who, by the way, has a new show. If you are into Dungeons and Dragons at all, I don't play Dungeons and Dragons, so I don't actually watch. Well, I've watched like the beginning of some episodes because two of my friends are on it. But if you are into Dungeons and Dragons, or you're interested in watching a bunch of knitters knit together while they play, check out Dungeons and Dropped Stitches. That's her new show. She's the dungeon master on it, which is like the storyteller. I barely understand these things. Anyway, she and I went to knit night at this local yarn store, and I was just yakking. We went to have dinner afterwards, and suddenly I realized I had gone more than a full repeat, just zoomed on past where I was supposed to put in the heel. So I started ripping it back, and then once I had ripped it back and I was about to like start on the heel again, I remembered that I also needed to stop the cable on the back a little bit before I got to the heel, because I had done that on the first one. And the reason I did that is the Fish Lips Kiss heel recommends that if you have any kind of texture, that you stop the texture in the back of the heel a little bit before you start the Fish Lips Kiss heel, because that part curves sort of out over your heel. So because I had done it on the first one, I really wanted to do it on the second one so that they were even. So I did this little bit of knitting surgery, and you may have seen it on my Instagram story, where I literally ripped out like the center 8 stitches, yeah, and I ripped way down like an inch or so in 8 stitches, ripping out the cable and then re-knitting it up, you know, with just like a crochet hook, hooking them where they needed to be, which was not as scary as it might sound. It was just, it looked pretty bad, which is why I took a picture of it for the Instagram story. But like, it was like open heart surgery on my knitting. But I was really glad that I did that instead of just ripping out a full inch, because ultimately, even if it wasn't faster, there's something nice about dropping down where it just feels like I'm the boss of my knitting. Like, I don't have to undo things that I don't want to undo. So that happened. And then it was mostly smooth sailing after that. On my first sock, I believe I mentioned I screwed up, like I had a different stitch count on the front and in the back. Again, that was intentional, but I forgot about it. So when I got to the Kitchener stitch, I had to undo it. And this time I actually remembered I had done that. So I made all different mistakes on the second one than I had on the first, but I undid all of my mistakes, and these are actually now flawless socks. They don't have any mistakes that I've left in them. I'm actually getting to a point where most of my knitting, knock on wood, most of my knitting, by the time I'm done with it, is flawless. It's not that I don't make mistakes, but I'm getting much better at catching my mistakes and also figuring out ways to rip back just portions to fix the mistake instead of having to rip back a whole lot. Like, I think one of the main reasons why people like to leave their mistakes is they don't want to rip back a ton of their work. But the more that I feel like I understand all the fundamental principles of what's going on in my knitting, the more I'm able to rip back. You know, it's not just dropping down 1 column of stitches. I can drop down 8 columns of stitches all at once and fill them back in. And I have the confidence to do things like that now. I have the confidence to drop down in something like Stranded Colorwork and fix it if I've screwed up the chart instead of ripping the whole thing. And because of that, and because I've just become more proud of having more polished, finished objects, I feel like a lot of my work is a lot more more polished than it used to be, more exact, and without any noticeable flaws. And it feels good. Like, I have to say, it makes me proud to look at something that's complex, like that cable hat that I made. I think I was wearing it on the last episode, the Nora Gone one. Had some complex cables, and there were places where I like did the wrong thing and I had to, you know, take back or whatever. But by the time I finished that hat, there was not a problem with it. There wasn't a place where there should have been blackberry stitch that there wasn't, or where something wasn't lined up, or where something cabled the wrong way. You look at the whole hat, everything is where it wants to be, and it's just so beautiful. And I think that's like something that is something that I'm enjoying right now. And again, like, this is one of those personal preference things, right? Like, there are plenty of knitters who it doesn't bother them when they have mistakes, and they think it's part of the character of the garment, and that's totally fine. Like, I would never criticize that if that's what makes you happy. We're all just doing this to be happy. I think I'm discovering that recently I'm getting a lot of joy out of being able to pull off a slightly complex project, like a cabled something, without actually having any mistakes. And again, like, I do make mistakes, but then I like undo them. It's just become like a new challenge for me. Like, it's become part of the fun rather than a burden. I don't know how long that'll last, but I'm enjoying it. We're about to get a big thump as he jumps off the table. Okay. That might be the end of Aggie time for this episode. We'll see. I know you guys love it when he makes an appearance, so I shouldn't even be like apologetic about it. I don't know why I am. Because everyone always says they love when he shows up, and I like it too. I like that he's my little like co-star, but he can be very disruptive to the camera with his tail and everything. Anyway, so that's all my finished objects. Let's move on to whips. And let me update you on what I'm drinking, because this also relates to the theme of this week, this Spooktober special. This is one of my teas from my Haunted House Survival Kit that I got from David's Tea last year, which you can see on one of the episodes of Vlogtober. I think the episode itself is called A Dollhouse for Your Tea. I could be wrong, but anyway, it's really, really cute. And it has different like Halloween flavors, and this one is cardamom French toast. Most of them are just flavors that they already have in tea, but like changed so that the name is a pun. But I don't mind it. They taste delicious. And it's unsweetened, as my tea almost always is, but of course it has that real natural sweetness just coming from the cardamom and the cinnamon and whatever else is in there. So, a really good flavor for fall. Okay, I'll start with my half object. This is also Halloween themed. So I have this little sock cube here that you may recognize is themed after the movie Hocus Pocus, which is my very favorite Halloween movie. One of my favorite movies ever. I know that it's not probably, like, objectively speaking good, but I can't really tell because I've loved it my entire life, and I just love everything about it, and I find it to be genuinely funny and just delightful. I literally watch it every year. Like, it would be crazy if I didn't watch it for Halloween. I believe you can see that in last year's Vlogtober as well. On Halloween night, I was watching it on the front porch while I gave out candy. But anyway, I got this last year. I love it so much. And I got it specifically, you know, I'll use it again too, but I got it because I really, really wanted it to house this Hocus Pocus inspired yarn that I won in Caitlyn's Big Scary KAL last year of the Wool Jewel podcast. And this yarn is called Amok, 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 which is a joke from the movie, and it's by Geektastic Fibers. And yeah, the colors are like green and purple and red, which are the colors that the witches wear in the movie. Each of them has their own color, and their cloak and their dresses and everything are that color. Also, by the way, if you've seen the movie, I'll just point out that my very favorite part of this bag is that there are like little brooms, but then there are also little vacuum cleaners. And you'll know why that's so funny to me if you have seen the movie. And if you haven't seen the movie, go find out for yourself. Please just go watch the movie. It's so great. I can almost guarantee you will like it. If you don't, like, I feel like you must be against happiness. I don't know. I love this movie. Anyway, so many segues today. I am sorry. I've got a lot of energy going on right now. So, I love having those special little projects, especially for the holidays, where they match. So I had won this just after Halloween, and I bought this, and I thought, I think it was like on sale or something, and I thought, this will be Halloween socks next year. And I very recently finished the Clark socks, which, by the way, I call my gingerbread socks because the colorway is called gingerbread, and they have this braided cable. It makes me happy, but I got a little ahead of myself. That's kind of Christmassy, not strictly speaking, but kind of Christmassy. So I just started these this week, and I was thinking initially, I will just knit the sock. I'll just get started, and I don't need to finish them in time. It's fine. And they will also be a Halloween project next year. I have some Easter socks that have been hibernating because I started them literally 2 years ago, I think, because I didn't end up knitting on them this past spring. And I just set them aside and thought, yeah, when I'm in the Easter mood again, when it's almost Easter, I'll just pull them out again and knit on them. It's fine. So anyway, I wasn't planning on trying to finish these or anything. And they have this cute little pumpkin guy on them, by the way. So I ended up finishing one because I ended up deciding to make them short. And the fact is, I didn't actually choose to make them short so that I could finish them sooner. What happened was, I've been wearing a lot of ankle boots and basically like this look where my pants just stop at the top of my ankle boots, and I don't like for my sock to be visible. With this specific type of look I'm cultivating. There are other times when I do like for my hand knit socks to show, but I found that a lot this fall with the pants I've been wearing and the shoes I've been wearing, I have wished that my socks wouldn't show, and I found myself wearing some store-bought socks that I still have and shorter socks and stuff in order to hide that, which just got me thinking I really should make, I should, you know, start making some shorter socks for myself, just to have more variety and more options. The longer ones are much warmer, but for some outfits I really like the shorter ones. So I thought I'll just start now. I'll make this a little shorter. And I didn't make it like technically a shorty sock or anything. I just did 15 rows of the ribbing, and then I did 15 rows before I started the heel. And what I have done typically recently has been 20 rows of ribbing and 65 rows before the heel. So quite a big difference. This is a pretty short little ankle sock. So I did that. I ended up finishing it a few days after starting it, so I was just really loving tasting this yarn. And after that, oh, and by the way, this end is woven in, I just haven't trimmed it, just for the record. But anyway, so I had knit this, just the regular, in regular stockinette with a twisted rib. I had been working recently these altered fish lips casillas that go down to 4, and I thought it was really too pointy. I'd gone off the deep end, so I'm experimenting now. I've tried this at 6, and I actually think I could go back to 8, and it would be nice. So I'm gonna try 8 next time, which might be what I used to do, or I might have done 10 before. I can't really remember. But anyway, so I knit them twisted rib, stockinette, just typical, my usual thing. And I do think this yarn looks really beautiful in stockinette, but I think it looks even better in reverse stockinette. And I think that's because it's so highly variegated. When you have reverse stockinette, there's this really magical thing that happens, which is that the rows of stitches hook around each other in such a way that they blend the colors together. They break up the colors even more. So if you think about stripes and how on the stockinette side, the stripes just have a clean edge, but when you look at that reverse stockinette side, you have that little dotted row on both sides of the stripes where the color of the stripe has hooked around the background color and vice versa, because that's just what the reverse stockinette does. So variegation is essentially the same concept as striping, but it's all over everything. So the colors are just getting much more mixed up and cut together. If you look at, like, by contrast, right, look at the stockinette portion and then look at the reverse stockinette portion. The stockinette is much more stripy, much more colors kind of keeping to themselves. And the reverse stockinette, they're broken in and color just splattered all over the place. It's more variegated. So I just think it's a really nice look, and I decided that was what I preferred. And so even though I had done reverse stockinette, even though I had done twisted rib on the ankle, on the cuff, and the inside of that is just a regular rib because I didn't twist my pearls, it's fine. I still think it looks nice. It's a little bit of a waste to have reverse on the inside, but I went ahead and kept with it. I'm just knitting the second sock exactly the same way, so that they'll be the same. And then the inside of a Fish Lips Kiss heel looks like this, so it's got a bit more of a visible thing going up the side, but I don't think it's ugly or anything. And the inside of the toe shaping really looks like nothing. It's pretty invisible. So I really love this. Now, I wasn't sure if this would be too variegated for Ryan, but I know that he loves these colors. He loves purple and green. So I asked him, would you like socks out of this too? And he was like, yes, 100%, I want socks out of that. And I asked him if he would prefer the stockinette side for his socks or the reverse stockinette. And he decided he'd also like the reverse stockinette. And then I thought, and I suggested it to him, what if I did the heel and the toe in stockinette and the rest of the sock in the reverse stockinette? And he loved that idea. So that's what I want to do with the leftovers, which I will have plenty of because I'm making these short. Another advantage to short socks, although I usually have enough to get about 2 socks out of 100 grams. 2 pairs of socks. Anyway, if I sub in some heels, cuffs, and toes, I can usually make it. But what I was thinking I would do for his socks, and here's something I'm thinking more generally about knitting socks for him. So I have several skeins of leftover sock yarn that I want to turn into socks for Ryan. I have my Jack and Sally self-striping from Jinx Yarn that I made into self-striping socks for myself last year for Halloween, and I have like half of that skein left. It's gorgeous. Ryan loves it. I want to turn it into socks for him. I want to turn these leftovers into socks for him, and I'm sure that's going to come up again. And part of what keeps me from doing it is that it's just not as much fun to knit a pair of socks with a fun yarn color when you've already sampled it. Like, it's basically like second sock syndrome, but it's, second pair of sock syndrome, where it's just more fun to start something with some yarn I haven't seen before, because I already know how it's going to knit up. I already know how beautiful it is. Well, my friend Melissa, who I mentioned earlier, is probably going to start a business. I'm not sure how much of this she's talked about publicly, so I don't quote me on anything, and I don't want to give any specifics or anything, but she does have a knitting machine, and she's been talking about starting a business for knitting people's neglected sock stash yarn. And so basically use the sock machine to knit it into tubes. A lot of people have been doing this lately. And then you just do afterthought heels and toes, and you do the cuff and all of that you do by hand onto the tube. So I thought that would be kind of perfect for these yarns where I've already used the yarn, so I'm not super excited about knitting it into another pair of socks for Ryan, but I do want it to be a pair of socks for him. It would still have the hand knit element of me doing all the heels, cuffs, and toes, so I think it's still a handmade gift. It's still my design concept behind all of it in terms of, you know, choosing to use the reverse stockinette side or what I use for the heels, cuffs, and toes, and, you know, how long you make them, and all these kind of decisions. It's really just the bulk of the tube that's just being done for me. I could support Melissa. So I think that's what I'm going to do with the rest of this, is have her knit it into a tube for me, and then go in and probably rip out enough of the tube, or have her set aside enough of the tube to do the heels, cuffs, and toes with the same yarn, and do them out of stockinette and the tube and the reverse stockinette, and then I'll have her do the same thing for some of the other yarns that I've been kind of neglecting but wanting to turn into socks for him. So that's exciting. This is where I am with the second one, by the way. I just finished the ribbing, which, like I said, I just continued in the twisted rib, even though I'm turning it inside out. I don't mind twisted rib as much as I once did. I feel like I've figured out a way to position my hands where it's a little bit simpler and easier, faster. So that's what's going on in Sockland. And I also have 2 sweaters going, not to mention the Sunset Highway, which I'm about to start short row shaping on the bottom of the body of that. And I expect to be onto the sleeves probably before we finish up the podcast, but maybe just after. We have 2 more episodes, and then we have the season 7 wrap up and the series wrap up. So we're going to be finishing Return to Stars Hollow after 4.5 years. The week of Thanksgiving. That's the plan, which is kind of amazing because, I mean, the whole thing is amazing, but the fact that it's happening the week of Thanksgiving is kind of special because there were several Thanksgiving episodes, and the Year in the Life dropped on Thanksgiving weekend, which I, you know, watched along with everyone else on Thanksgiving weekend, and 2 years ago. I was thinking I might either rewatch Year in the Life and have a knitting marathon, or you know, start season 1 or something of Gilmore Girls over Thanksgiving, because instead of being sick of it, I've just lately I've been much more in the mood than I have been in a little while, because I've just been getting really nostalgic about it. So anyway, I will be back to sharing my progress on that sweater once my progress is anything different than what it was the last time you saw it. And the reason that's my Return to Stars Hollow project, if you don't know, is all the yarn in it is Gilmore Girls themed hand-dyed yarn. So I'll show you that later. But in addition to that, I have 2 sweaters going. Let's start with the one you haven't seen yet. No, let me say this to whet your appetite. The one you haven't seen yet is a test knit for Melodie Hoffman. We will get to it in a moment. First, let's look at the Zweig. So, the Zweig, as you may remember, I'm kind of going different than most people have done with this, and I am knitting it out of non-superwash. The yoke is hand-dyed, but it's beautiful hand-dyed non-superwash from Maddfuzzy. And the body is Shetland from Jamieson's. And I made a lot of progress on this since I saw you last. I believe I was partway through the lace. I believe. You've seen me knit on some of it, on the color work, I think, if you watched the first Vlogtober episode that I did this year. But I have now made it several inches into the rest of the body. And then I basically set it aside. So I was knitting on this a bunch until I cast on this other sweater, and then I've been neglecting it for good reason, because the other one has a deadline, so it's got to be the priority. But I think it's looking really good, don't you think? Yeah, I don't have anything really new to say in terms of the experience of knitting this. Oh, wait, no, I do, because okay, so it's just been a little while since I've knit on it, so I kind of forgot. Okay, so all over the body you have these little X's made with, in the pattern it's 1x1 cables. Now I mentioned I was going to use twisted stitches to do them instead, because it's faster. And I'm a little concerned that they're not showing up as well as they could be, but I'm hopeful that they'll be more noticeable once it's blocked. And they're certainly more noticeable up close than from far away, and I think that's typical with other Zweigs that have been done in a darker color. You know, that's just sort of the trade-off there. You could do it in a lighter color, but it's fine. Anyway, I was going to do twisted stitches instead of 1x1 cables because they're faster. What I discovered is that what I've been doing is, when it's left leaning, when it's left leaning, I've been cabling without a cable needle, because that turns out to be a little faster for me than a left leaning twisted stitch. But when it's right leaning, I've been twisted stitching, because that's faster to me than cabling without a cable needle to lean right, or with a cable needle or anything. So these are actually a combination of, each one of these has 2 real cables and 2 twisted stitches, which is really weird. I don't think anyone's been doing it like that I've heard. I know people that have done them as cables and people that have done them as twisted stitches. I think I'm the only weirdo that's doing them half and half. But like, ask yourself, why are you doing what you're doing? If I'm doing it for speed, if I'm doing it for like, what's the simplest motion? I tried it every which way, and that's the simplest way to do it, is left cables, right twisted stitches. So it's a little strange, but they look fine. At first I was getting a little worried that they didn't look close enough to each other, but they actually look fine. Even Andrea of Fruity Knitting was doing them interchangeably on the same sweater. Well, she was doing, to show people that they were the same, she would do an entire X with twisted stitches and then an entire X with cables. What I'm doing is weirder than that. But even Andrea was like okay with having a mix on the same sweater, because you really just can't tell the difference. And she's pretty perfectionistic. She's kind of a stickler for those things. So I think it's fine. And I am just super psyched to wear it. So I'm excited to get back to this. But right now, most of my attention has been going toward this other sweater, which I will show you. Now, in fact, the fact that I've been knitting really monogamously on this other sweater is the main reason why I was like, I can't be knitting on these Halloween socks trying to get them done for Halloween. But now that they're knitting up so quickly, I probably am going to do that, because I've made pretty good progress on this sweater, and it's not due until November 20th, so I think I have plenty of time to dedicate a few days to the socks. Plus, I do have more knitting time this week than I would normally have, because I am off work this week, which I will talk about in the chit chat why that's going on, but more knitting time, yay. Okay, this is a test knit by Melodie Hoffman, also known as Bee Mandarins. She is a beautiful designer and a very wonderful person. Just has the most gorgeous videos and Instagram and everything. If you just want something that looks serene and lovely and you don't know her yet, you have to check her out. But I had seen her pattern for this a while ago, because I'm a patron, and so I see what she's working on ahead of time. And I loved this one. I knew I was going to knit it when it came out. And then when she called for test knitters, I was like, I kind of just want to knit it right this instant. And so, you know, why don't I skip to the front of the line and just volunteer to be a test knitter if she'll have me. Now, I have not test knit ever before. So that made me a little apprehensive because I don't like the idea of like letting someone down, and I know I shouldn't commit myself to a lot of things right now because, you know, full-time student, full-time working, life stuff. 2 podcasts. I have a lot going on, but I just really wanted to do it. I'm glad I did because it has not been difficult at all to like stay monogamous with this and make progress on it. And that was sort of what I was thinking. I was like, I know I can commit to this because this is what I'm going to want to knit on when I cast it on. It's not going to be a burden at all. That's exactly how it's felt. So she was calling this the mustache before she had a real name for it, but now it's called the Austra. This is what it's looking like so far. And the reason she was calling it the mustache is that it's going to have, this is going to be the bust here, and it's going to have this row of fringe, of black fringe running just under the bust, which she thought kind of looked like a mustache. But I love this so much. So hers was made out of this really lovely French yarn that is part yak. And at first I thought I would love to use that yarn, and I would, you know, it could be part of my Rare and Precious Jewels entry for my own knit along, which I sometimes neglect. And I was excited to try yak because I've never tried yak. But when I looked it up, it was kind of hard to find in the US, and when you could find it in the US, the colors were very limited. And I really wanted it to have a similar color story to the one that she did. Now, she had like a cream color as her base with little flecks of orange in it, so this is quite different, but the light and dark and the neutrals was sort of what I had in mind. And so I did what I almost always do, and I bought Brooklyn Tweed. I'm not gonna apologize for the fact that I freaking love Brooklyn Tweed yarn. It's a little basic. If anything in the knitting world can be basic, I mean, we have kind of a weird hobby, whatever. The concept of basic is stupid. But you know what I'm saying? Like, it's an obvious choice, at least in the States. But I think it's an obvious choice for a reason, because it is good stuff. And especially Shelter is my favorite base. It is, if you don't know, Columbia Tarkey. So it's a blend of 2 different breeds, Columbia and Tarkey. It is grown out west, milled in Maine, I believe, and distributed out of Brooklyn, I assume. And it is woolen spun. So it's really light. Like, this whole thing has a lot of yarn in it, but it weighs nothing. And really, really, really warm. And then it just has this gorgeous, gorgeous marl and tweed to it, because all of the colorways are done in the wool. So within Brooklyn Tweed Shelter, there are a number of different colorways, and recently they introduced, well, maybe like a year or 2 ago, they introduced 3 marls. So you compare, like, there's a little bit of a marling happening here, right? And there's Tweedy beds. But this is one of the actual marls. You can see right here how it's got that kind of candy cane quality to it, where it's a 2-ply. One of the plies is clearly gray and one is white, versus here where the plies are the same. So there's 3 marls in the line now. There's this one, which is made with Fossil and Sweatshirt. Fossil being the almost white color. And then there's one that's made with Fossil and this, cast iron. So it's, I think, called Newsprint. This is Narwhal. And then there's one that's like a tannish with the white, I think. And anyway, I'd never used the marl before, but I really liked the idea because the main sort of feature of this sweater is this panel in the front of 2-color linen stitch. And so it creates this almost checkerboard effect. And I really liked the idea of making the checkerboard have sort of even more depth by having the light sections also be 2 colors because of the marl. So I just thought that would be kind of an interesting choice, and I really like it. And you'll see that where it's just knit up by itself, it's really subtle that the marl is even there. I mean, it really reads as just a sort of light gray, and then you get up close and you see there's a lot of depth going on. So I'm thrilled. Like, I have always loved Brooklyn Tweed Shelter, but I'm super into this marl now. It's just a delight. So essentially, I mean, I don't want to go into too many details about how the pattern works, but she has shown photos of it in public, so that's why I feel okay showing it to you guys. But and she did her call for test knits on Instagram. But you know, basically, it's pretty simple, and there's this 2-color linen stitch happening. Now, this wasn't called for in the pattern, but I sized up 2 needle sizes for the linen stitch because it tends to be a little tighter. And because I have a large bust, I just really didn't want to risk it, that it would be tight at all across my bust. It's a generally really oversized fit anyway, with a lot of positive ease. So it's probably not an issue for most people, but because I have a large bust, I just, you know, wanted to play it safe. So I sized up a little bit. And the linen stitch, some people think is fairly tedious. So when I bought this yarn in my LYS, I was telling the shopkeeper about the test knit I was doing, and she told me linen stitch, she hates it. She thinks it's really tedious. And I get why, because every other stitch you have to pull the yarn to the front or to the back, which is part of the reason why people really hate, like, 1x1 rib, although I think they also hate switching from knitting to purling generally. But I don't know, it's not as tedious as 1x1 rib, I don't think. And if you're tensioning the yarn well, you actually don't really have to move it that much, because you can get in behind it or in front of it pretty easily because it's sort of open. You have that open space to work with. So I've started trying to tension it better, and on a lot of my purl rows, for some reason it's easier for me to kind of tension it well on the purl rows, don't ask. But on my purl rows, I've been sort of tensioning the yarn more properly, the way that you the way that is sort of traditionally done for what's considered picking. I've been doing that on my purl rows, and it's been speeding me up a lot. On my knit rows, I'm still just really slow, and I also hesitate to just sort of start doing a different way of tensioning the yarn in the middle of a project because I don't want it to throw my gauge way off. So I've just kind of experimented with it a bit with the purling, and I think that's okay. I don't think it's going to make a huge difference in the gauge. But yeah, if you tension yarn as like a flicker or a picker, I feel like there shouldn't be any reason that linen stitch should be tedious, as far as I can tell. There's not really that much moving the yarn around. It's more just getting in behind it or in front of it, if that makes sense. But yeah, I've been enjoying it. So I'm like halfway through the linen stitch, maybe a little more than that. I think I'm maybe 5 inches and I need to go 8, something like that. But that's going to be sort of really the trickiest part of the sweater, and then it's just a lot of simple, you know, picking up for the sleeves and the neckline and for the bottom, and adding that French. I did start it with a provisional cast on. You then pick up and do the bottom after that. You could do it where you do the rib first, but essentially the ribbing isn't just one circle, it's separate split seam, like front and back. And you could do that where you knit them each separate and then you join them if you wanted to just do fully bottom up. But this was how she wrote it to do it in the pattern, and you know, since I'm test knitting, I want to, you know, basically stick to the pattern with the exception of things like sizing up my needles or whatever. But yeah, I didn't want to just totally go rogue. So I did this Provisional Cast On, and I just did it in this crochet cotton. It's pretty thin stuff. You can see it's also what I have my live stitches on here. And this was an idea that I took from, I used to listen to the Knit More Girls, an auditory podcast a long time ago. I kind of don't have time for it anymore, which is why I've stopped, not because I don't love it, but I got the idea from Gigi, I think, to use crochet cotton for provisional cast-ons, because it's not woolly at all. It's really, really slippery. And so when you unzip it later, when you pull it out, and kind of the same if you are holding stitches on it and you pull it out, but especially for the crochet provisional, you're not going to be catching because the yarn isn't going to be like woolly stuff that's trying to hook onto the woolliness of your yarn. And I found that it works really well. I had been using it. I just bought like a huge spool of it for no money on Amazon. And then I was using it to tie up skeins when I was hand dyeing last year. And I put it up with my hand dyeing stuff and I kind of forgot it was there. So I hadn't been using it. And when I remembered, when I had this provisional cast on to do, I was glad that I remembered, because I think with this really, really woolly, sticky yarn, I'm going to be super glad that my provisional cast on unzips without pulling any fuzz loose or, you know, sticking to anything. So that's a little tip. And then the other thing to mention is just, so this is the back, right? This is the front. I've split. And you actually in the pattern are supposed to knit the front first, but I just kept going on the back because I was knitting on this when I was on the bus going to Lexington to the horse track with my office, which you can see in Vlogtober. And I needed it to just stay vanilla. Not that this is difficult at all, but it does take two skeins, obviously, because it's two colors, and so just for portability, and like you're on a bus and there's a bunch of people you're walking around, it was just way easier for me to only have to keep track of one skein. So when it came time to split, instead of starting on the front, I just started on the back. And then as I was knitting it, I realized, like, I don't know what to do with this, because what you're meant to do is knit the front to a certain point, then do some neck shaping, and then go back and knit the back to the length of the front. So I'm not sure what the length of the front is going to be, because I measure it and then I do the neck shaping. So it's the measurement I take plus whatever the neck shaping is. So I don't know what that's going to be. So what I did was I just kept knitting until I ran out of this skein. And I think it might be too much, which is fine. Like, I'll just rip it out. No skin off my back to just knit like an inch or so too much with Brooklyn Tweed Shelter. I mean, it's delicious to work with, so I didn't mind that at all. But if it's not enough, then I'll just join a new skein. So either way, I'm fine. But it's possible that I intentionally kind of like knit more than I needed to just so I could run out of that skein. That's just my own silliness. But anyway, I guess that's all I have to tell you about this for now. I'm super excited about it, and I will almost certainly be wearing it the next time I do an episode, because I need to finish it by the 20th, so I've been doing once a month lately. It's possible I'll do a few episodes in November if things calm down a little bit. I'm not sure they will, so anyway, I'll have it done soon, and I really can't wait to wear it. It's just going to be wonderful. Oh, I know what else I wanted to show you about that. So I knit a swatch, and I actually knit the swatch in the round, which is what you're supposed to do when you're knitting in the round, because your gauge changes from round to flat, because when you knit in the round it's all knits, and when you knit flat it's knits and purls, and sometimes your gauge is slightly different on knits than purls. So the way that you knit in the swatch in the round is that you basically just knit to the end of the line, and then you just pull your yarn loosely around to the beginning again, leaving these loops up the back, and then you just cut the loops and they make this fringe, right? Now, I usually don't knit my swatch in the round, even if my sweater is going to be in the round. I don't know why, because I just don't think about it. I'm not used to it. I'm afraid of doing it wrong. I don't know. I just normally have not. I knit this in the round, and I realized I should always be doing this because it's freaking easier, you guys. Like, what? Like, it's easier because you only do knits, you don't do purls. So for the same reason that any knitting in the round is easier than knitting flat. And then also, you don't really have to count your rows because you have these little loops going up around the back. You can just count your loops. It is easier than knitting a gauge flat. I wish someone would have told me all these years. So that's my PSA to you guys today. It's like, knit your gauge swatches in the round. It's simpler. And it gives you a more exact measurement. So I don't know what I've been doing. But anyway, wanted to share that. Plus they look really cute when you're done. I think they look cute. The only downside to it is, if you get into a desperate game of yarn chicken and you want to salvage yarn from your swatch, you can't because you have cut it into a million little pieces. So that's the only downside. Keep that in mind. If you are in a potentially yarn chicken situation, you should still knit a swatch, but maybe don't do your swatch in the round like this. Maybe do it full on in the round, or do it flat or something. Or do it in the round like this, but don't cut it up, and then like maybe measure it with like a sewing tape instead of a ruler, something that bends. I don't know, but consider not doing this if you anticipate really cutting it down to the line with yarn chicken and wanting to salvage the yarn from your swatch. I usually don't end up in that situation, but because I prefer to buy too much yarn so that I don't end up in a game of yarn chicken, and then I just have the problem of too many leftovers. But yeah, so I really enjoyed doing a proper round swatch. I know we're going a little long right now, so I'm going to try to speed things up. I do want to share with you on the horizon, and then I just want to update you on a couple things for the chit chat segment about Spooktober and that. So obviously the Austra took me by surprise. I did not mention last month that I was going to be knitting that because I didn't know that she was going to be calling for test knitters. So that pushed back my other plans. However, just before I started that, I did get yarn for my next sweater, and this is what I will be doing next when I'm done with the Austra. I'll probably cast it on while I'm still working on the Zweig, just because it's sort of a different project. So this is more Brooklyn Tweed Shelter. This is the postcard colorway, which is this really gorgeous sort of lavender gray with little tweedy flecks, even some reds in there. Oh, beautiful stuff, as I have said many times. And I got this because, you guys, the Stonecutter is happening. I'm knitting on this. Like, I don't know when I'm finishing it, but I'm knitting on it next. And I've been thinking, and again, I'm not committing to this, but I've been thinking that I want to try to go to Rhinebeck next year. I've said in the past that I will not be able to go until 2020, and that's because I basically already have plans for all my vacation time for 2019, and I used all my vacation time this year on school because I studied in Wales, and so that ate up a lot of it, and then I had my residencies in Cambridge, so I couldn't go to Rhinebeck. I didn't have any time to spare. So I thought I would go in 2019, but then I realized I was going to eat up all my time for that because I have winter residency. Ryan and I are planning to go to Portugal for our 10th anniversary in January, and then June residency. I'm graduating, and we are going to do a little celebration trip after my graduation up to Maine. But I want to go to Rhinebeck real bad, and I was getting some serious, it's not even like FOMO so much as just, it makes me want to go. Like, it's not some negative thing like watching Rhinebeck stuff and seeing Instagram. It doesn't make me like bitter or afraid that I'm going to not have some experience or something. It's not really like that. It's more that it just makes me realize how much I would enjoy going. Meeting people, especially seeing people, just being immersed in the knitting world, but also having the opportunity to check out some yarns, some more farm wool and the kind of wool that I'm really into, and more smaller distributors and different breeds and things that I don't have a lot of exposure to. So it's both. It's the products, it's primarily the people, and just the opportunity to be surrounded by other knitters and that energy and see all of their sweaters. And, you know, to meet a lot of people that I am friends with online, but I've never met in person. So I was thinking about it, and I was thinking that I can probably make it work with only, I mean, I could really, if I only went to the market on Saturday and I flew back Sunday, I could make it work with only one vacation day. But if I let myself have sort of the full experience, which I would prefer, I could make it work with 2 vacation days. My plan would be that I would fly out Thursday night, probably to the Albany airport, maybe Newark, and then rent a car and drive into Rhinebeck, stay the night, have all day Friday to kind of relax, meet up with people, go to Indie Untangled that night, and then have Saturday at the market, possibly Sunday at the market, and then fly back either Sunday or Monday, depending on if I want to use 1 or 2 days for it. So I think I can cannibalize those out of my graduation trip. It would just mean making the trip a little bit shorter, which is sad, but I feel like it would be more meaningful to have the Rhinebeck experience than to have a couple more days on my graduation trip. So I talked to Ryan about it, and he's perfectly okay with it. I mean, he's very supportive of whatever I want to do. So I'm not saying I'm committing to it, but that's something I'm really thinking about doing. And I know it feels like we're in the chit-chat segment now, but this is getting back to the Stonecutter. So when I think about Rhinebeck, of course I think about what would be my sweater, and one thing that has come to mind is that if it were cold, this would be a really amazing Rhinebeck sweater. It's kind of exactly what I would like a Rhinebeck sweater to be. I really love the idea of something cable-y, I always have, and something really kind of rustic and woolly. You know, the yarn is from New York. We're in New York. I know, you know, it's like a bigger company, not like a, you know, directly from a farm, but it's the kind of thing that I imagine my ideal Rhinebeck sweater would be. I would probably wear something indie dyed to Indie Untangled, and then at Rhinebeck I would wear something like this in my mind, in my fantasies. You know, and ideally it would be cold enough. In my fantasies it's cold enough. If it's not, I have plenty of lighter weight things, but so that's definitely a motivation for actually finishing it this year and not letting it just linger. And I know I haven't even cast on yet, and I'm already like worried that it's going to linger, but you have to understand this is a pretty complex thing. I have never done anything this complicated before. And I know a lot of people who did their stonecutters relatively quickly, and I know a lot of people whose stonecutters have literally taken them years. Now, years with lots of languishing in between, and usually these are people that tend to have more projects going at once than I do anyway. They tend to let things languish more than I do. But it definitely makes me on guard for the potential of this being something that's on my needles for over a year. I don't have a problem with that. It's fine if it's on my needles for more than a year. But if I want to wear it to Rhinebeck next year, that's certainly motivation to get it done sooner rather than later. I don't expect to finish it in time for this season. Like, I don't expect it to be done while it's still cold outside. Maybe it will be. Maybe I'll surprise myself. But if I don't cast this on until, like, you know, late November, I would be surprised if I finished it in just a couple months, because it's complicated. Then I would imagine I would just set it aside and let it sit there for a while, and then I would start thinking about it when it was fall again. But if I have the idea that I want to wear it to Rhinebeck, maybe I'll get it done faster. So we'll see how that works. Now we're actually officially moving into chit chat. So I'm going to keep this brief, but I wanted to update you guys. So the Vlogtober situation is this. You may have noticed I had the first weekend, part 1 up, and then I had part 2 up, the really cool Renaissance Fair footage. Some of you saw it, a lot of you saw it because it was up for a week. But when I tried to put up what was going to be part 3, it was the 3rd weekend. It's now called part 2. I was trying to put it up. I was having a lot of technical difficulties. I will spare you the details. They are boring. But I accidentally deleted Vlogtober 2, the Renaissance Fair one, which was so cool and really meant a lot to me, and I worked really hard on it. I accidentally deleted it from YouTube, and because I'm switching between computers right now, because I'm also switching jobs right now, I didn't have any backup footage of it. It just, various things happened. I was trying to transfer things from my phone, and so I ended up deleting my recently deleted folder of footage on my phone, and so I didn't have the original footage even if I wanted to put in the time to edit it together again. I didn't have any version of it, and it was heartbreaking. I was really, really, really upset. But I decided to cut my losses. I finally was able to upload that 3rd weekend, and I called it part 2. And I decided maybe I need to give myself a little bit of a break. Life's really crazy right now, and I'll just have 2 Vlogtobers. I will have every other weekend in October instead of trying to do all 4. So I went ahead. I didn't vlog this weekend. This is the last weekend in October. You're getting this episode instead, which is, you know, even better. So that was really hard, and it sucked. I deeply apologize if you wanted to see that, if you were looking forward to it. I had mentioned in the first Vlogtober about the Renaissance Festival and how I wanted to vlog it. I'm super sorry if you were looking forward to that and you didn't manage to see it before it was deleted. It totally breaks my heart. I'm super upset that I don't get to watch it again and have that as a keepsake and everything. But for everybody that did watch it while it was up that 1 week, I hope you enjoyed it. And thank you for watching it. It gave me a lot of comfort to know that even though it was deleted, that it wasn't deleted before anyone could see it. So the fact that a lot of people had already seen it really gave me a lot of comfort. So thank you to everyone who did see it and who encourages my vlogging and my show generally, and just, you know, all of that. I love you guys. So that's basically the situation with Vlogtober. I wanted to explain that because I didn't really explain it anywhere, and I thought people might notice that it had disappeared, and I just kind of wanted to let you know the situation. And then, so my plan is to do Vlogmas, actually doing every day in December. December is a little bit easier for me than October because of my school schedule. So hopefully that won't be a big issue. I am still sorting out some technical difficulties. Again, super boring. Don't want to bore you with it, but hopefully that will kind of sort itself out and be okay. That's my plan. And then, like I said, right now I'm changing jobs. So it's very exciting. You will know this if you've seen on Instagram. You may know it already, or if you've watched Vlogtober 2, but basically the whole story is the very abbreviated story. I work in advertising. I'm a copywriter, and I've been working at the same agency for 4 years, and in early summer, I was contacted. I have my portfolio online, and in early summer, I was contacted by a recruiter in New York about a position in Cincinnati because they had a new office. It's actually an office that's been here, but it was affiliated with a different agency. It doesn't matter. This place, this New York agency, had taken over this office, this Cincinnati office of another agency, and they were hiring and growing, and so a New York recruiter had contacted me. Fast forward, the whole process itself took almost 3 months. I ended up having 6 total interviews, both on the phone with the New York recruiter, getting handed over to Cincinnati. I did a Skype interview with some leadership from Cincinnati. Then I came into the office and I interviewed with 4 different people. I had to do a test where I had to write in the brand voice of 3 of their different clients. The whole thing was really has been stressing me out and freaking me out all summer because I really, really, really wanted the job. I was really excited. I am really excited about it. And I was really scared that I was going to be disappointed. And there was a lot of work that went into it. And this was not a great time for me to find a new job. I wasn't going to be looking for a new job because I wanted to wait until after I graduated so that, you know, I wouldn't have to not only deal with the job search, but also learning a new job, all while still being a student. It's just a lot. But this showed up, and what can I do? I was so excited about it. At the same time, another opportunity at a different agency in town showed up, and so I ended up interviewing with them, and I did 2 interviews with them. So all summer has been like kind of you know, job hunt madness. And so there's been the actual work that I'm putting into those things, you know, the kind of awkward scariness of like having to interview, and so you have to leave your office and worry about getting back in time, and you kind of have to tell white lies about it, which I'm very uncomfortable with. And then I was constantly worried that I was going to be disappointed, and so I would be checking my email all the time and just like really, really, really wanted this. I got the job offer. It's wonderful. It's everything that I want. It's going to be consumer facing. It's going to be more creative. It's a more senior role than I have. Obviously, it's more money than I have because it's a more senior role. It's downtown, which I live in the city. I live just north of downtown, in a different neighborhood that's not technically downtown, but it's still like mixed use urban. But I've been working all this time in a suburban area, which I don't love because like when you try to walk to lunch, like people stare at you like you have 3 heads, because there's like 6 lanes of traffic and a big median in between them, and it's just not my scene. So I'm super excited about everything about this job, down to the location. It's like the most perfect location it could be. It's right on the river in the very top floor of this tall building where you can see the river, Kentucky on the other side. You can see my favorite bridge, the Roebling Bridge, which was the prototype for the Brooklyn Bridge. So it's really beautiful if you know what the Brooklyn Bridge looks like. You can actually see the football players practicing in the stadium, which is right in front of us. And because the stadium and the park on the riverfront are the only things between us and the river, it's just a beautiful, unobstructed view of everything because those are low down. So like the location is beautiful. I'm excited about the clients. I'm excited about the work. I'm like excited about meeting new people and starting at this new place. I am just over the moon happy about it. So I'm really excited that I can share it with you guys now, that I can share it with everyone, that I can tell people about it. But yeah, it's been a crazy process. The actual process of getting this job was more difficult than anything I've done that wasn't like, you know, work for like a degree, you know what I mean? Like, it was more difficult than getting into college. And when I got into college, I ended up transferring out to the university and majoring in creative writing. But when I got accepted, I was actually trying to study theater. So I got into the conservatory, which, if you don't know, like Juilliard is a conservatory. If you've seen Save the Last Dance, it's kind of like that. So it's like there's an audition process, and they're very, very selective. My conservatory, actually, when you do the math and you look at all the people that audition and how many they accept, it's actually only 7%, which is about half the rate of how many applicants get into Harvard. So that was the most stressful, difficult accomplishment that I had ever done before, up until this. And this was actually, took more time and effort and took a longer period of time, and it was more nerve-wracking for me. Unless I've just blocked out a lot of what was so hard about getting into the conservatory. I don't know. But yeah, so it's like this crazy amount of stress and secrets followed by just rejoicing. So it's just been an emotional roller coaster. So that's kind of what's going on with me right now. And it's just good stuff. So everything's coming to an end and new things are beginning right now. I had my last day at Gyro on Friday. This is the weekend. I'm taking a week for myself, which is great because, like I said, I used all my paid time off for school, so I wasn't going to have any time to rest this entire year. So now I have time to rest, and it's time to rest where I'm not checking emails or worrying about anything for work because I'm in between jobs. So taking a week. Now I do have some schoolwork to get done in that week. I have a deadline on Monday that I'm frantically working toward, but I will have a few days off where I can kind of relax. And that's my last big deadline for the semester. I have a smaller deadline a few weeks after that. Then I'll be done with the semester. And like a week or two after that, I'll be done with Return to Stars Hollow forever. So a lot of the stuff in my life is transitioning. And it's huge because it's very emotional. I finished doing the last of the episode show notes for Return to Stars Hollow this week. I just went ahead and I did both of the last episodes at once. So I looked up all the external references for the last time, and I watched a show and an episode and chose a rating and chose a favorite moment for the last time. You know, it was like a lot of lasts, and it kind of got me choked up. It's been a huge part of my life and of the lives of, you know, a lot of other people, including my co-host, and it's coming to an end. The school semester is coming to an end. I only have one more, and changing jobs, and so it's a weird time, and it's a really exciting time, and it's also nice that pretty soon I'm going to have a lot of burdens kind of lift off of me and have some time to sort of relax a bit, catch up on things, do some things that I've been wanting to do, like maybe get back to designing the Kutch shawl and stuff like that. So life is very full at the moment, and it's very good. Yeah, and I'm going to go now because I have rambled on for so long. Thank you so much for joining me today for the Spooktober special. It's been great to have you. Happy Halloween. I hope your autumn or your spring, if you're in the Southern Hemisphere, is going wonderfully. And thanks again so much for joining. And I will see you in a month, if not sooner. Take care, everybody.